the home of the giants, the territory of the most important emperor, and one of the last islands on the Grand Line. What kind of secrets are waiting for us in the land of Elbaf? Could it be stories about the sun god? Could it be the third and final ancient weapon? Could it be knowledge of the Void Century? My answer to all three is yes, yes, and yes. It is my belief that all of this can be discovered in the land of giants, that they are hiding remnants of the Void Century within their own history and oral traditions. And it's there that the story will finally begin to come together, on our last stop before we head to Laughtale. Could Elbaf be the key to truly understanding the sun god Nika? Welcome to the Hidden Island, and today we are going to take a look behind us, all the way back at Little Garden, to try and answer some of these questions. The Giants of Elbaf are one of the oldest cultures remaining in the world of One Piece. Each individual giant can live for hundreds of years, and their warrior culture traces back to long before the Void Century. Oda introduced these guys to us on an island full of dinosaurs. It's not a stretch to say that if any race of people in this story were able to preserve the history of the ancient kingdom better than the others, it would be the Giants. And I don't even like football. It's no coincidence that Oda is saving our trip to Elbaf for the very end of the adventure. So close to the end that we even got to meet Vegapunk and see the Gorosei transform before we even get any lines of dialogue out of Loki. It's also no coincidence that Shanks, the same person who set Luffy off on his adventure, the same person who was in possession of the Nika fruit, made his territory on this very same island. So why might that be? Could it be that the giants and their ancient culture hold some of the greatest answers we have yet to hear? I think so. Even though he didn't have the entire story planned out back then, I think Oda has been keeping Elbaf in the pocket for decades now, waiting for the perfect opportunity to use a location of this magnitude. Even from the beginning, he was dropping little nuggets of information through the cryptic wording of Dorian Bragi. But more importantly, they and the rest of the giants regularly reference Nordic Vikings, culture, and mythology. You guys know this already, but we have to retread this topic if the rest is going to make any sense. So, why is this important? Let's turn to an interview that Oda did with Viz back in 2012. Question: the world of One Piece has many different kinds of pirates with unique styles. How and when did you first think of the idea to write a manga about pirates? Answer: ever since I was little, I liked pirates. As a child, I really liked an anime series called Vicky the Little Viking. It was about a little kid who admires Vikings, and his dream is to become one of them when he grows up. As I did research on pirates for One Piece, I realized that Vikings are a type of pirate. I feel that it's awesome to have friends on your team, just like in the Vicky series. It may not be the best comparison, but I feel like that series' spirit is carried on within my work. And oh, how true that was. Since then, Oda has made a few nods to the series, the most obvious one being this little Viking character who looks like Oda's version of Vicky showing up in chapter 1076, begging Shanks to take him out to sea just like Luffy once did. And apart from that, he's right. Vikings are some of the oldest examples of pirates that we can find in history. Boats were central to their culture, and a lot of their warriors were responsible for setting out on ships to raid villages along the coast of Europe. The giants in One Piece may very well be some of the oldest pirates in the story, and if it stopped there, we wouldn't have much of a theory to talk about today. What makes them so interesting is that Oda has used this tribe of characters to make some very deep references to Nordic mythology. At a surface level, names like Thor and Loki show up in the story. But then you have Hyruden's ship, the Naglfar, sharing a name with the Nordic ship of the dead. Going even further, the giants being Vikings in the first place is very fitting, since a lot of their mythology is centered around the concept of the Jotnar, a race of giants who are constantly at odds with the Norse gods. This concept is going to be very important later, so make sure to remember it. Then you have lines like this given to us in the most recent chapter, 1111, where Trevor Verges reference Svalin, a legendary shield that is said to block the sun and protect the world from its heat. By the way, I'm just going to say right now, I'm probably going to mispronounce or butcher a lot of these Nordic terms. Just bear with me. I'm not a Viking. I'm not Nordic. I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm not going to do a good job on the pronunciation, I think. Anyway, all these references take me back to chapter 129, when Trevor Verges aid in the Straw Hats' escape from Little Garden. Before they do their flashy move and take out the giant goldfish, they drop a very curious line. Only the great serpent soaked in blood can withstand our attacks. Behold, the mightiest spear of we giants of Elbaf. I've talked about this plenty of times on the channel before. I even made a video about it 2 years back. But let me ask again, what do you think this great serpent soaked in blood could be a reference to? I believe they're saying that the only thing capable of withstanding this attack is the red line itself, and it's simply referred to as a serpent in giant culture. The red line could be seen as a great serpent wrapping around the world if you use your imagination, and it definitely shares the color of blood. I mean, it's the red line. And what do you know? Such a thing exists in the real Norse mythos. Introducing Jormungandr, also known as the world serpent, a giant snake or sea serpent said to live in the ocean that wraps around the entire world and bites onto its own tail, creating a ring. It's actually surprisingly on the nose, but even more so than you may at first think. The entrance to the red line, as seen in chapter 101, displays these ancient stone arches with depictions of some kind of sea beast or serpent carved into them. Not so unlike the petroglyphs and carvings we have of Jormungandr. So the question to ask here is, who made these carvings, and why else would they be at the entrance to the red line if not to symbolize something about it? But let's get back to the mythology. Jormungandr holding onto its tail is actually crucial to the balance of the world, and when it finally lets go, this event will be one of the things that heralds the coming of Ragnarok. What's Ragnarok? A disappointing video game. Ragnarok is the Nordic equivalent to the apocalypse. It's said that when Ragnarok happens, the era of the gods will end and the era of man will begin. More specifically, the giants and beasts and Reddit moderators will go to war with the gods. Many gods will die, including Odin and Thor. The world will be engulfed in fire and will then be submerged underwater before a new land will emerge in the aftermath for the surviving humans to repopulate. In short, the world serpent breaking its loop around the world will lead to a final war that ends the era of gods. Let's try and see how that fits into One Piece. The red line wraps around the entire world, and on top of the red line lives the self-proclaimed gods, the celestial dragons. One very old theory has circulated for a while suggesting that Luffy will, at some point, destroy the red line, inadvertently destroying Fishman Island beneath it, and fulfill Charlie's prophecy. Destroying the red line would mean destroying the home of the gods, potentially bringing an end to their rule, and this event would not go uncontested without some kind of final war that would involve Emu using the Mother Flame, setting the world on fire, and as we know, every time the Mother Flame is used, the global water level rises. Enough uses would likely submerge the world underwater. Taking it a step further, in Norse mythology, it's Thor, the god of lightning, who fights and kills Jormungandr, and in One Piece, who else could wield the power of lightning uninjured unless they were made of rubber? We've already seen Luffy directly beat a lightning god who name-drops Thor in his own attacks, and later on, Luffy harnesses the power of lightning himself during a fight against... a giant fucking serpent. So is it a reach to say that a lot of this symbolism is intentional? That the red line and Jormungandr are parallel symbols, that the final war and Ragnarok are parallel events, and that the giants who already worship Nika and befriended Luffy prophesied these events long ago? Not at all. In fact, I think this is all very intentional on Oda's part. But if you watched my original video, none of this would be new to you really. So the next thing I want to focus on is taking it a step further. I want to see exactly how deep the mythological connections may go. Can we find any other examples, stories, or depictions that Oda could have pulled from? Let's start with the ancient weapons. Before we get into this part of the theory, I want to ask you two questions. What was the original purpose of the ancient weapons? And if Luffy got control of all three, what would he use them for? Let's not waste any time. I believe that the ancient weapons were designed specifically to destroy the red line. I think that during the Void Century, it was already known that the Red Line would either be created or used as a base of operations by evil people to rule the world. And so, the ancient weapons were designed as a contingency plan to destroy the Red Line and free everybody from tyranny once Joy Boy returned and gathered them back together again. Therefore, the world government forbids research into these weapons, not because of the danger they pose to the other countries, but because of the danger they pose to their regime. That's the big secret. The government clearly doesn't mind them existing as long as they're the ones in possession of them, as we saw when they tried to acquire Pluton. They just don't want anyone else to have them, and of course, by researching the poneglyphs in order to learn about these weapons, you'd necessarily also learn about the world government's history and what the weapons were designed for, which would once again be a direct threat to their power. It's clear that nothing else in the story is capable of destroying such a massive continental structure, and if there's anything out there that can, I'd imagine it's these weapons of mass destruction. But I also don't think any individual ancient weapon can do the deed. I think it requires the combined force of all three: Uranus, Pluton, and Poseidon. The god of the sky, the god of the underworld, or in a way the land, and the god of the sea. Poseidon is said to be able to sink entire islands beneath the waves. Pluton is said to be able to blast islands away, and we don't even know what Uranus is capable of, but the running pattern here is that these weapons can destroy land masses in different ways. So what if the true purpose of these is to destroy the largest landmass, the Red Line, from three directions? One weapon destroys it from underwater, another destroys it at sea level, and the other destroys it from above. Pluton is a ship and can't attack things at the ocean floor, nor can it attack from the sky, at least we can guess. Poseidon is a mermaid who can control sea kings, restricting her influence only to attacking from the water and not above. And Uranus, if the name is anything to go by, can only attack from the sky, not dive beneath the waves. Individually, sure, they can be used to destroy islands, but combined, now that's where the magic happens. Combined, they can destroy the single biggest piece of land in the world. The only piece of land that stretches from the ocean floor to high above the clouds. The Jormungandr, the World Serpent, the Red Line itself. And like it was told back in Fishman Island, a man will someday arrive to guide the ancient weapons toward their true purpose, and I think we can all guess who that man is. And now that Luffy is confirmed to be Joy Boy and has been predicted to destroy Fishman Island, located directly beneath the Red Line, there aren't many other ways this story can go. I am totally convinced that these weapons of mass destruction were in fact made to destroy, but their act of destruction, when in the right hands, wouldn't be harming the people of the world, but freeing them instead. Funny how a lot of this centers on Fishman Island, when if we go way further back in the story, we can find a similar situation in Arlong Park. Arlong conquered an island full of people and built a giant tower from which he would rule over them. He even named this place in reference to Sabaody Park, located just in front of the Red Line, part of a location that is basically a hub of slavery. And so he took inspiration from this and turned it around on the humans. Arlong believed he was better than humans, that humans were simply made inferior. He viewed them as accessories and as slaves. He would have his men collect monetary tribute in exchange for their lives, and even took one of their people, Nami, up to his tower where she would be forced to work for him as a slave, complete with his signature brand on her arm. Arlong is the Fishman version of a celestial dragon. And when Luffy went up to Nami's room, when he saw the prison she had been subject to as Arlong's slave, and when Arlong spoke of Nami as a thing to be used, how did Luffy react? He destroyed everything. He destroyed the maps, the furniture, the walls, and eventually brought the entire structure down from top to bottom. Luffy destroyed Arlong's miniature version of Marijois in the Red Line. So what's going to happen when Luffy finally sees what's going on in the real Marijois? I think I've already made that much clear. So how does this all connect to Norse mythology? Well, I think it would be important to answer another question to make this easier to understand. Why did the Celestial Dragons establish their kingdom on top of the Red Line? Why did the Lunarians, also once considered gods, live on top of the Red Line as well? I believe the answer is simple, and also something I've talked about on this channel before, once again. The source of devil fruits, the tree from which all devil fruits originated, resides on top of the Red Line. I think this is the sunlight tree Eve, whose roots are said to reach Fishman Island and provide them with sunlight from the surface. But one problem, the Eve tree cannot be seen from either side of the Red Line. Surely a tree this large with roots that reach this far below with the power to capture and transfer sunlight should be visible somewhere on a map, but it isn't. We don't know where the top of the tree is, so let's make an educated guess. Fishman Island is directly below Marie-Joie. A tree with roots that reach the bottom of the ocean must be very, very tall. A tree that absorbs so much sunlight must also be exposed to a lot of sunlight at the top. Therefore, the Eve tree very likely stretches from the top of the Holy Land to the bottom of the sea. And being in such a confidential location such as Marie-Joie, chances are no one has actually had the chance to see where those roots can trace back to. But let's talk about the devil fruit thing. Why is this the devil fruit tree specifically? If it isn't obvious enough, devil fruits are a reference to the story of Adam and Eve, who live in the Garden of Eden, a type of paradise, where the devil convinces Eve to eat the forbidden fruit. In One Piece, we have a tree that is named after Eve herself, the first one to eat the fruit. Eve is also the first woman, and only female trees can bear fruit. So we see Emu hanging out in the Chamber of Flowers that almost seems like a miniature Garden of Eden. If there are other plants growing in this room, who's to say the Eve tree isn't growing in the back? And this is without even mentioning the sunlight-related nature of the tree in connection to the very real sun god Nika, the mortal enemy of the current gods of the world. So to summarize, I believe the devil fruit tree is the same tree that provides light to the fishmen at the bottom of the ocean, and thus is both the reason Fishman Island is located where it is, as well as why Marie-Joie is located where it is. I bet you're still waiting for that Nordic connection, and congratulations, because I'm about to tell you, you made it. In Norse mythology, they held the belief that the entire world and all the other worlds were part of a giant tree, a world tree known as Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil was essentially viewed as a tree from which all life in existence was formed, a Nordic parallel to the trees of life and knowledge in the Bible. In fact, just like how the serpent in the Bible lurked near the tree and tricked Eve into eating the fruit in exchange for eternal life and knowledge, the Nordic world tree is also surrounded by Jormungandr, who, as we discussed and we now know, was a giant serpent biting its own tail, which is also a common ancient symbol known as the Ouroboros, a symbol for eternal life. Serpents and trees are apparently a running theme in a lot of religious stories. Don't ask me why. But it's said that when Ragnarok begins, due in part to the separation of Jormungandr, the tree itself will begin to shake and tremble. But it doesn't stop there. You see, all the different realms are said to exist on different parts and layers of Yggdrasil. Midgard is where us normal humans live, the world of humans located about halfway up the tree. But if you keep going higher, you'll reach Asgard, the highest realm on the tree, closest to the top, high up in the mountains where all the gods live. Think of it as a Nordic Mount Olympus. In fact, the gods were said to assemble at Yggdrasil on a daily basis to perform their traditional governing assemblies. Are you starting to see the connections? If you were to remove the red line and expose the tree underneath, wouldn't it look a lot like the largest tree in the world around which everything else exists? Wouldn't it seem like a giant tree trapped within a serpentine wall that wraps around the world? Considering the tree stretches to the bottom of the ocean, that would mean Midgard, where all the people live, all the islands on the surface of the One Piece world, are located about halfway up. If I'm right about the Eve tree, the Holy Land of Marie-Joie is essentially One Piece's version of Asgard, the land of the gods located closest to the top of the world tree, far above the realm of man, the location where all the gods assemble and determine how to govern the world. And by breaking the binding of the world serpent in this example, the red line, the tree would be in jeopardy, war would ensue, the mother flame would set the world ablaze, which would then cause floods to sink the land, and ultimately, the era of gods will end. It's almost 1-to-1. I'm hoping this all makes sense so far. Believe it or not, we still have a little bit more to discuss, but before we do, if you're enjoying this video so far, please do me a huge favor and show me your support by subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. When Ragnarok does happen, I will be barricading the hidden island and using it as a bunker, and only my subscribers will be allowed in. Anyway, now that we've established Yggdrasil, the world tree, and its One Piece counterpart, I want to talk about where the tree gets its power from, because I believe this can answer something about the ancient weapons, their locations. The world tree is said to draw its power with 3 roots and from 3 wells, 3 gigantic water sources throughout the world where its roots extend. They are as follows: Vargelmir, Erdar Brunner, and Mimisbrunner. It is from each of these 3 wells that the roots draw water, but what makes them interesting are their descriptions, locations, and how they connect to each of the locations in One Piece housing each of the 3 ancient weapons. The first route connects to Vargelmir. Vargelmir is the ancient spring from which all rivers flow and all life originally came from. It is located furthest down on the world tree in the deepest layer of Niflheim, located right around here. It is a dangerous place, being that the waters here are infested with monstrous snakes and dragons. Now let's look at One Piece. In One Piece, the ancient weapon Poseidon is located underwater in the deepest part of the world, the ocean, which as we know is the source of all water and all life, towards the bottom of the Eve Tree in Fishman Island, which is surrounded by terrifying and lethal sea kings, giant sea serpents that lurk nearby. Okay, kind of a weird connection. The second route is connected to Mimmisbrunner, but we're going to skip that for a second and come back to it. The third route is connected to Urdarbrunner, a mystical well located in the highest layer near the Land of Gods in Asgard, high above the other 2. And it is at this well that 3 maidens live, known as Norns, who are said to be able to see the fate of the world and look into the future, giving this source of water the reputation of being the Well of Fate. These Norns peer into the future and are said to weave threads of destiny and carve runes into the wood based on what they see. Where is the third ancient weapon Pluton located? In a country high above the sea, submerged in the water surrounding the land of Wano. And what is Wano known for? Could it be maidens who predict and influence the future? Or could it simply be the fact that Wano was the place where poneglyphs were made? The people of Wano carved the fate of the world into these stones before they were distributed across the planet. They were the ones who wrote these messages on the poneglyphs, and as far back as Skypiea, we can see that they even refer to themselves as the ones who weave history, quote. The Wano people essentially served the same function the Norns did in Norse mythology. And that also makes 2 out of the 3 weapons we know of submerged in water, meaning that the third will likely follow suit. 3 weapons underwater, 3 wells that fuel the tree. See where this is going? If you don't believe me, listen to this. The second route we skipped over before is connected to Mimmisbrunner, a spring of wisdom located in the middle of the other 2, in the land of giants, Jotunheim, which lies just outside of Midgard, halfway up the tree, right about here. So, the first one is here, the second one's here, and the third one is here. Odin is said to have taken a drink of the water there, but only after having to sacrifice one of his eyes to do so. And oh, look at that, in One Piece we have Elbaf, the land of giants, located at sea level, possessing ancient knowledge under the protection of an emperor who has a scar over his eye. I would bet my life savings an ancient weapon, Uranus, is located here, and I'm gonna guess that this one is also located underwater somewhere on Elbaf in the metaphorical third well. So ultimately, when all 3 wells of the world tree are disturbed in this example, when all 3 ancient weapons are acquired, the world itself will begin to drastically change, and the kingdom built around this tree will be put in great danger. Is that what Big Mom meant when she asked whether some of the One Piece is located in Wano? I think Oda chose these locations with some level of intention, trying to connect Norse mythology, and by extension the mythos of the oldest pirates into his own pirate world. Not directly, not literally, but symbolically crafting parallels that he could draw upon so that when we do meet the giants and they do try to explain their perspective on the history of the world, they will do so using their own ancient mythological stories. And if they do house the third ancient weapon, I'm assuming they're going to speak of these 3 locations in much the same way that I have today, explaining to their sun god why they have been protecting such a powerful weapon for all these years. They will speak of the Red Line as the Jormungandr, as they already once have, the Eve Tree as the World Tree, and the coming final war as an event much like Ragnarok. But there's a final piece of this puzzle that I want to try and answer. Where does Emu fit into all of this insanity? In the Nordic mythos, before anything really existed in the world, it's said that there was initially a magical void, or gaping abyss, known as Ginnungagap. I think I'm saying that right. And in this void there was eventually a mix of hot and cold, out of which venomous water condensed, and from the dripping of this water was born a primeval being. A being born from the void known as Ymir. the ancestor of all giants and basically one of the first life forms to ever exist. If you've watched Attack on Titan, the name Ymir is probably familiar to you. Well, in the real story of Ymir, he is born from this mixture and created the giants, and Ymir is thought to have not been a god, but instead a purely evil being, along with all his descendants, distinguishing Ymir and the giants from the godly stature of those like Balder, Thor, and Odin. Before long, Ymir was killed by Odin and his two brothers, Vili and Ve, a trinity of gods who were meant to symbolize wisdom, will, and spirit respectively, and they took the now dead body of Ymir and used it to create the world. Get fucking owned. Imu is a central figure in the Void Century, emerging from the void in history in which the world government was born and the new gods were deemed to have created the world. Imu is, by all observations, pure evil and has lived longer than probably anybody else in the world right now. Imu, a false god, will end up being defeated by Nika, a real god, manifested through the preservation of wisdom, the power of will, and the transference of spirit, all in order to start the world anew. So, I believe in this case, Imu is a clever twist on the story of Ymir. Does that make Imu the ancestor of all giants like Ymir was? I don't think so. Like I said, I don't think all of this will be a straight copy of Nordic mythology. The Gorosei, for example, are named after the Roman pantheon, not the Nordic one, and all their transformations are Japanese yokai, so I think Oda will definitely play around with the elements, mixing and matching the mythos to make it work within the context of his world. But the heavy influence of Vikings and Nordic creation myth on his story is undeniable. So, if I had to guess, I think it's more likely that rather than giants, Imu is the ancestor of all demons, that all the Gorosei, with all their monstrous forms included, came from Imu's powers and evil disposition, and these demons are posing as gods, still living in the Garden of Paradise, taking the dreams of men hostage and ruling over them for centuries. False rulers, who need to be defeated by the giants, by the humans, by the creatures of the sea, much like in Ragnarok, before the balance of the world can finally be restored, so that a new era, one without gods, can emerge, and man and fishman and giant and mink and dwarf alike can live freely under the sun. But that's just a theory. A game theory. At the end of the day, we'll just have to wait and see what the warrior land of Elbaf truly has in store for us. Thank you for stopping by the Hidden Island. To me, all this stuff is just for fun, but at the same time, I gotta say, I really enjoy researching ancient cultures like this, even if it's through the context of a manga. I don't think all of this will pan out the exact way I laid out, but the reality is we gotta appreciate even being able to make theories at this point. There aren't many big mysteries left to take a crack at now that the story is coming to a close, so hopefully this was an enjoyable ride for all you guys watching. If you enjoyed the video today, please like and subscribe to keep the music alive, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks again for watching the show because I sure enjoyed putting it on. Until next time, have a great day, a good night, and a wonderful romance dawn.